So I am going to actually talk to you about not subject specific, but the approaches to learning that actually cuts across all disciplines and subjects at the MYP level, and what it means and how we actually do it. So I'm going to, like Beijing, will give a demo lesson. It was a lesson that was actually done just recently at our 6th and 7th grade classroom. Okay, so you have an idea, because they tend to be very abstract, and we tend to agree at an abstract philosophical level that we should all teach those so-called soft skills. You have many names for them. Critical thinking skills, those are the buzzwords, right? But what does it mean and how do you actually teach them? It's very funny. Just so you know, you get a laughter. So the ultimate purpose of school education, what is it? So all the way down, I can take tests. So hopefully our students be on MYP or high school or even college, that they actually become lifelong learners. But what does that mean? Again, like I said, we all agree that we want our kids to be lifelong learners, but what do they look like? Are these what you have in mind when we talk about lifelong learners? Can you actually teach those skills, or those skills just happen naturally? If you were a science student or a student in a science class that just took place, would you have naturally developed some sort of skills? Or does it need explicit teaching instead of just hoping that those skills would somehow be cultivated implicitly? So let's take a very quick look. What does it mean by skills? Like that kind of skills? Yeah, I know, that's just something funny. So at MYP, they make it a very big deal of skill learning, right? And they have a name, it's called ATL, Approaches to Learning. There are these 5 areas or 5 groups: communication skills, social skills, self-management, research, and thinking skills. And under each group, we have subgroups. And within each subgroup, there are specific skills, single skills that we actually teach them, either in context or explicitly sort of in isolation, and practice throughout the year. And for a typical unit meaning, say, we have an international trade unit coming up, I would probably identify 3 to 4 approaches to learning skills. And we're going to do one today, so you're my students. And this is the MYP belief, and this is actually very mind-blowing for me when I first learned and trained in this approach. These skills can be learned and taught, improved with practice, and developed incrementally. While they are not formally assessed, they are assessed on more of a discipline-specific content, but they do show up in the students' report card. And they contribute tremendously. So for example, just think back of what you just did in Ms. Meijin's class. Just imagine that a student, if he or she was not able to follow instructions, it does not matter how well that lesson was designed and presented, that student, if not being able to follow instructions or even have the stamina to get beyond asking questions, or when they start reading, they get lost and start chatting, and they're playing with those models for completely different reasons, or rolling on the floor. Of course, that's not happening. Again, the skills are so important, right? Self-management, self-regulating. So it does make those skills, they do contribute to their achievements. And again, like I said, because of the approaches to learning cut across all disciplines, that provides teachers a common language of talking about, let's see, because of all these large amount of skills, how can we actually cover them in MYP, and how do we teach and have them practice by the students systematically. So we're going to Yeah, how do you learn a new skill? So for example, just a quick, very quick example, not a demo. You heard about creativity often, right? That word has got thrown around so often. So can we just say, if I give you a piece of paper, and to tell you, okay, draw a model of the sun, moon, and earth, and be creative. That one statement of be creative, what does that mean to you? Do you consider yourself a creative person? If you do, can you raise your hand? Do you think you're creative? The hands can stay, so that I could. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay. 6, yeah, like, maybe, right? So half of you. So so when a teacher tells a class, be creative, that teacher actually speaks to less than half of the class. The other half, if they don't consider themselves creative, what does that mean to them, right?
It's a very ambiguous word.
Exactly. So a good teacher or a good approach to learning teacher would do this, and that's what we did one day. I brought in a book, it's called Many, Many Colors, and we read that book. It's a storybook, very simple. It just connects color with emotions. Like today is a blue day, and I feel like a fish swimming in the ocean, that sort of thing, okay? And then for IB, there is a learner profile with 10 attributes. So after that book, I asked each and every student to assign a color to an IB, to each of the IB attributes. As long as they can justify or, make one sentence, there's no right or wrong answer, of course, right? So at the end of that very quick activity, I gave them a statement. Creativity or being creative is just to put two objects together in an unusual way. And everyone can do it. So instead of just keep telling them be creative, you tell them exactly what it is and you have them practice. And now they know when you put two objects together in an unusual way, that means to be creative, right? So that's how we teach skills. So what's the cost, of not teaching? You just sort of, assume that they will be developed naturally. That's it. Okay. So these are just, we want to tell you, these are not unusual. But these are some of the self-management skills, organizational skills, that's part of the whole ATL package. And we're going to, so how do we teach them? Let's jump right ahead. Here is just to show you that for each discipline planning, for each unit, we actually highlight ATL and try to teach them. So implicit meaning embedded in a unit learning. And I'm going to show you how to teach it explicitly. It's actually still part of a unit learning. So for example, just now, Ms. Meijin mentioned one key skill is to give and receive meaningful feedback. What does that mean? So when your classmates or each one in the classroom completed a map as part of their assessment or final project, right? Their mapping project. And we want to be able to give each other feedback so that they're constructive, meaningful, and I can learn and grow from feedbacks, right? So to receive and also to be able to give. How does that happen? Do you already know how to give and receive feedback? Not necessarily, right? So that's what we're going to do now. That does not just happen, so we're going to do a demo lesson. And the skill today is about giving and receiving meaningful feedback. So first, and these two lessons actually took place. So what you're going to experience is what actually took place recently. So first of all, as a class, we watched this film together.
This is a story called Austin's Butterfly. And it's a true story about a first grade boy, and his name is Austin, and he goes to school, or used to go to school, in a town called Boise, Idaho. And in his class in Boise, Idaho, they were studying butterflies, and he had to do a project. His job in first grade was to draw a butterfly, and this is the butterfly that he picked. Austin had to use this photograph as his model, and he had to draw an accurate scientific drawing of this butterfly. This is called a tiger swallowtail.
I knew it!
Can you tell Toby why it's called tiger?
Because it kind of has the stripes of the tiger right there.
Good. So, here was Austin's job. He was supposed to do a scientific drawing of that butterfly. But remember, Austin was only in first grade. And you know what he did? He forgot to look like a scientist carefully. He got his paper and he just started to draw the image of a butterfly that he had in his head. And he wasn't looking like a scientist, and so this is what he drew.
Whoa.
It's not bad, and it is a butterfly, but does it look exactly like this? No, it doesn't yet. It doesn't look exactly like this yet. Luckily, this wasn't a regular school where Austin went. It was an expeditionary learning school, just like Presumpscott School. And so they didn't look at this and say, good, Austin, you're done. They said, Austin, good start. Now we can start giving you critiques, so you can do a second draft and make it better, and a third draft and make it better, and you can make it much, much closer to this, and he was ready to go. All of the first graders in his critique group sat on the floor like you guys are, and they decided to split their advice into two kinds. First, just the shape of the wings. And then when the shape was right, they'd give him advice about the pattern inside the wings. Alia, what would you say?
You can make it much pointier.
Good. These wings could be much pointier. Who else would add something? Atak, what would you say?
How about the angle? Because, not to be mean about
Yes.
the angle, it's just not exact, so...
Okay, so show me. Come on up here, Atak. Show me what you would ask him to do slightly differently.
like to make it a little longer.
Longer where? Draw where you would do it.
Right there.
Okay, so pull this out longer.
Yeah.
That's very specific, Atak. Thank you. Jamila, what would you say?
It's like triangle?
Good. Jamila, I love that. So you're saying more like a triangle shape. And I agree. Well, you know what? Those first graders came up with most of those same ideas. And do you know what Austin said? He said, okay, I'll go try. And he went back to his seat and he drew this. Does this look more like a triangle? Yeah. Did he go out further, like Atak was suggesting?
Yeah.
Did he add some jaggedness here,
Yes.
like Cindy? Did he get rid of that bottom thing?
Yeah.
So he did listen to his friends, and he made it better. It's not perfect. Toby, what would you say?
I'd say don't put those little tail things so pointed in. I'd say put them more pointed down.
Good. Okay, Ethan, what would you say?
I think you should make the wings like this, not like just like
Okay, he listened to his friends, and they said, this is really a lot better, Austin. That second draft really is better.
Yeah, they can make a third one.
Good. Maybe he could make a third draft. And so he did this draft.
That's his third draft.
That's his third draft, Hadley. That's just right. Elijah, what do you notice there?
Well, one wing's more pointed than the other, and that side is a little bit higher than the
Good. Coburn?
other. Right here, it doesn't have the inside thing still.
Ah, okay. Needs a little bit more of that notch. So, do you think maybe he should do a fourth draft?
Yeah.
Well, that's just what he said. He said, shoot, okay, I got round again. I'll go back and do a fourth draft. He listened. Does it look more even like Elijah was suggesting?
Yes.
Yeah. And does it look like it's coming out a little sharper, like Cindy was suggesting? And like Attack was saying, it's a little, the angle looks a little better. So now Austin was feeling really good. He said, am I ready to add some pattern? And they said, okay, why don't you try adding some of the pattern? And he did.
He's good at it. He is so good.
And then they said, Austin, you're ready for color. Let's look at his last draft. And what do you think? Did it come out really good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me show you where he started, just to give you a quick reminder. And then, what do you think about how much progress he made? And Tak, what would you say about his progress?
Okay, so because of the time, our students really loved, like you enjoyed it, right? It was very engaging, and our students loved it too. They actually asked to watch it again, and they were like, "Oh, it was so good!" So they actually reenacted some of the scenes. So what we did just now was to it's an introduction of something new, although it's a language that we all seem to understand, give and receive meaningful feedback. But here you see something in action that's very dramatic and very relevant, relatable, right? Those are students and actually younger students. So you can actually Google it. It's called Austin's Butterfly, and I love that. After that, within the same lesson, now that they're mentally prepared, they have their buy-in. They're like, wow, really good, let's also do that, right? But how? You give them tools. It's called I see, I think, I wonder. It's called a group practice. It's a new skill, so we're going to practice as a group. I don't know what it's. Yeah, okay. So here's a picture. We're actually looking at a different picture as a class when it actually took place, but I found this one for you guys. So as a class, we're going to observe and give some statements. It's called I see. So tell exactly what you see. I think, what do you think happened? And I wonder, what are some of your wonders? What do you want to know? So I would call, so what do you see? Let's do some I sees. Just strictly what you can see, not infer, not anything that goes beyond, but what do you see? I see.
I see many people on the back. I see the fire.
Okay, you see fire, many people.
Yeah.
Yeah, more? Yeah, you could see.
Smoke.
Like what else do you see? Let's have some statements.
They are burning the ivory.
Burning ivory. Okay, yes, those are ivories. That may not be obvious to some,
Yeah.
but yes.
I feel they're protesting against something.
So that's, and I think,
That's
right? Yeah, that's good.
Oh,
That's
good.
your next step, because that does not say protest, but that's what you infer. That's what you think.
I see something that's, looks like it's already been burned in a little.
In the back.
little-
The pit.
The on the right hand side. On the
Oh,
right
over
side.
here.
Yeah.
That could be the ashes, or from the previous, or Yep. So we do that as a group, right? We take our time, because this is important. We don't rush. It's a new skill. So we practice I see, a lot of I sees, and that's may not be something that we actually give our children enough time to do in class. And that's something that you could do at home with them. It's actually very important to be able to stay at the IC level for as long as possible. And you could do it as a family. It's almost like a game. Let's do more and more ICs. There's a flag. The more you see, especially, I love, the diversity of a class, because everyone sees things differently, even though, with the same picture. So, and then I think, that's where you draw prior knowledge, ivory, and then the shape of the building that may tell you something about where, the location, geography. And that's why the class discussion is so rich and helpful for other people, and it's non-threatening, right? So I see, and then I wonder. So that's also where some of the students are very strong about wondering, relatable wondering, not something irrelevant, right? But that takes practice. It does not just happen overnight. So that's a group practice that we did together. It's called I see, I think, I wonder. And then the next lesson, we practice. So after a group practice skill, now you've had some experience with the skill. Then in twos or in pairs or partners, we call a weekly meal plan. Sometimes we could skip that. It depends on how new the skill is. What it means is that they recently in PE class, they did a meal plan, right? So that's something readily available. So sometimes they're ready to jump directly into something brand new, but then we want them to deal with one new thing at a time. When the skill is still new, we want them to practice the skill with old content or content that's familiar to them. So that's why I chose the weekly meal plan. That's something that comes to them easily. So what happens is that in pairs, they look at each other's meal plan and give feedback to each other using the I see, I think, I wonder. Okay? But we add one twist is you can decide what criteria or what aspect you want feedback on. So for example, I want to you to give me feedback whether you think this is a balanced meal, for example. So you have some ownership over what kind of feedback you want to receive on. Okay? So with that, we practice this. And then finally, we move on to this so-called museum walk. So the students, before they colored, when they still did just the first draft, we did a museum walk. It's just put all of them either on table or on the wall, and then everyone has a pad of post-it note. And then they could use I see, I think, I wonder. The I wonder in this case is how you give suggestions. Instead of I think you should, or then you use I wonder if it would be clearer if you add something. That's how you could give something in a respectful way, a meaningful feedback. So before the coloring, after the pencil draft was done, we did this one round of so-called museum walk. So, and then the owner of the map of that draft would write what aspects you want the feedback on. So for example, the design or the sophistication or whatever, whatever you choose. So they walked around with Post-it in hand and they practiced. And then after that, each of them would collect many Post-its. And then you always, as the owner, you always can say yes or no, or do something different, right? You own to the feedback. But if the quality of the feedback is good, then you do tend to say, oh wow, I didn't think of it. So it goes back to the Austin's butterfly, how you help each other to learn through giving and receiving meaningful feedback. Okay, I see that we have only 10 minutes left. Just one more statement, and then we want to open up to parents who are here today, with the partial goal to share with prospective parents, because these are current MYP parents. One of them, like Glenn's daughter, actually left for some time for public school and then actually returned. So I'm sure you have questions to ask. But before that, I just wanted to echo how similar we design a unit in different disciplines. I think Beijing mentioned that she would start with phenomenon, right? And then you move up and then down. So similarly, when we design a unit of the individuals and societies, which is called social studies in traditional school, a lot of times teachers start with facts. Facts or standards if you're a public school, what you need to be covered, right? And move up to topics from all the facts. So for example, tea as a global beverage, it's history. So that's what comes to mind, right? Tea or coffee. But why? Why do you want them to learn about those facts, right? Why those, the use of tea as medicine or refreshment, and then tea and its symbolic role in British imperialism. So there is a lot about that. A lot of directions that you could take. And then we move up and we identify some of the relevant topics. And then move up to key and related concepts. Through all these facts and informations, what do we want them to take away at the conceptual level? Up above that is the conceptual understanding. There needs to be a statement, right? Because you want them years after this. You don't want them to only remember tea as a beverage. You want them to take away an enduring conceptual understanding. And then coupled with global context and explorations, then we come up with a statement of inquiry. and then move down to, then based on that statement of inquiry, how do we want them to inquire? There are factual questions, conceptual questions, debatable, the summative assessment, and then we identify the ATL skills that we just talked about, and then to make it a complete unit, and then we decide where we start. Do we start with T? Do we start with global trade? Where do we start? But this is how we make a comprehensive unit. So it's not just about, and then to think about how to teach it in Chinese and mesh it with Chinese language and literature. So the Chinese individuals in society has a more global cut through all these concepts, whereas the English department, the English individuals in societies, they're more focused on the American history, because that's where we are, right? So, but still, because of the limited time, because they're only teaching it almost half of the time, they teach it in blocks. So it's not, the goal is not to cover each and every event chronologically, but to, again, identify topics, identify concepts, and teach them that way. So they have the depth of American history and also the breadth of the global context.
And
So
this
it's
is in
perfect.
social studies class? This is the...
We call, in MYP, we call individuals and societies. It's one of the 8
And is it just
subjects.
the one teacher?
No, 2, Chinese and English.
Oh, okay.
But each teacher, Chinese, we teach individuals and societies and Chinese language and literature. So you have 2 sets.
You would teach it in Chinese and you also would teach it in English?
Yeah, the English teacher then.
No, Su Laoshi, we teach different grades.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
so
we
the
have
English
Randy
teacher-
and Miss Angel, they teach the English side of individuals and societies. But we're not teaching the same unit. The Chinese are
That's
more
just an
global.
English class. That's-
No, English also follow this.
Oh.
But they're more embedded in the US history,
Okay.
the American history.
English is a history
Yes, so
class,
teachers-
modern English, or
teachers-
is it an English class?
Who teaches language.
English also has individuals and societies and also language and literature.
Okay, that's
And
cool.
then-
So the English teacher teaches 2 disciplines, 2 subjects. Same thing with Chinese. I teach individuals and societies this way, international trade, for example, and I teach language and literature, and we mesh these 2 together. So in Chinese, you don't just learn Chinese. For example, Wen Lin, she's been talking about the revolution. That's part of her individuals and societies lessons, but taught in Chinese. With novels, with essays, that's how you get the language and literature aspect of the individuals in society.
So what are the subject matters? There's math.
Okay, so this is a quick assessment. What are the subject matters? There are 8 traditional MYP subject matters, but there are 9 because of the Chinese and English.
So, well, math, science.
So individuals in societies,
The social
That's
studies. Oh, social studies.
which is social studies usually know. Language and literature, but just so you know that here you get double, right? Chinese language and literature, English language and literature. Chinese individuals in societies, and English individuals in
Which
societies.
are different, one can be American.
Exactly, this is more global, cut across. And then the English individuals in societies is more American history, so that they're not missing out on any. So, but we've named only 2, right? And then science, and then math, there are 4 of them now. Design,
Design,
art,
art,
PE.
PE,
Spanish.
Spanish, yeah, that's the third, it's called language acquisition.
So everyone in 6th grade takes
And up,
Spanish.
6 through 8.
And it's still, it's the same way, it's taught the way English, the Chinese, it's just like, this way, it's not traditional, just like, let's learn.
Yeah,
you know.
but that's more language acquisition. It's not at the level of language and literature. Because Chinese, they
Or
read and
Spanish.
write and read novels and essays
Everyone
and
learns Spanish.
newspaper. But Spanish is
The traditional language.
traditional language acquisition.
Do you think that, go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just want, so individuals and societies is Chinese and English, language and lit is Chinese and English,
Correct.
science is all
English.
English, math is
All Chinese.
Chinese, yes.
Design is,
English.
English.
and then art.
Visual art.
Visual
is
art is Chinese,
Music
music
is
or
English.
performing arts is English.
And phys ed?
English.
English, yeah.
Depends.
Do they have the-
This year.
This
yeah.
year. Yeah.
So roughly break down, it is actually more English than Chinese at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If we're talking about those key academic subjects, is we tried the 4 out of the 4 key subjects, individual societies, language and literature, science, and math. We tried to do half-half, right? It's the design because they don't weight the same
Right.
in terms of class.
Right.
Yeah. Because we have a lot more language and literature than design, for example. That's once a week.
Okay.
So those are those classes, it really happens to be, if we could find talent, that's more important than the language, right? The phys ed,
Okay,
physical
right,
ed.
right, okay.
If it's a great PE teacher, regardless, English or Chinese, because that's only once or twice a week.
Okay.
Okay. But thank you for clarifying
Okay.
the
The
language
English
piece.
teacher is teaching American history, the equivalent of American history.
Yes. But also at the conceptual and thematic, it's not just, okay, let's talk about from year, a timeline. Yeah, definitely.
Like, for example, in the United States, we have traditional tea that is not British, right? Didn't we have like chamomile tea or herbal tea here?
Yeah. So that's more the Chinese, but that's just the thought process, right? It doesn't have to be, we cover only American tea or Chinese tea.
Or like green tea is not particularly British, right?
Yeah, no.
So is 6th, 7th, and 8th grade all together taught? Or I guess it'll depend
No,
on the
no.
number of students?
Depend on the number of students for this year specifically, 6th and 7th grade, they're combined for some subjects and separate for others. It's a very sophisticated, for example, they separate for math, 90%, science together, English also 90% separate, Chinese, I would say probably 70. There's 2 days separate, 3 days together.
Is that the same as language and literature?
Yeah.
So say for science class, if it's 6th and 7th grade, how do you teach this? Do you teach
Good
the
question.
same subjects?
So as the science teacher, I have all the core ideas from NGSS and I basically split them up into units. So I have what I call 6th grade units.
Can you come over so you can?
So basically I have what I took all the core ideas, I split them into units. So there are some that I designate as 6th grade units, some as 7th grade units, and some as 8th grade units. So this year, for example, the 6th and 7th grade students are doing 6th grade units, but it's a rotation, right? So by the end of middle school, they would have covered all the topics.
All 3.
Just not necessarily in
the
the
same
order
sequence.
that I
Yeah.
say is 6, 7, and 8, but the order is
So if
something
you
I made up
start-
anyway, so it
If you
doesn't really
start in
matter.
6th grade and you don't complete the middle school program.
So for
you might be
example, this
missing-
year's 6th grade group started off with 6th grade units. Next year, because of the way it works out, they have to do 8th grade units with a 7th grade group, right? But it doesn't matter because the following year, they will do the 7th grade units. Because how I designate the units didn't really matter anyway. I sort of took, because in NGSS, it's all just middle school core
It's a
ideas.
band
And
of
I
grades,
just chop it up that way. Does that
So
make
what
sense?
happens if you leave after 6th grade? You're not gonna learn.
Yeah, just
Then-
don't leave. The short answer is yes, you just, same thing if you go to a school
Exactly.
for just 1 year, you get only 1/3 of their curriculum.
Because even in whether anywhere in New Jersey, even though they all do NGSS supposedly in public school, but every school, every district, they chop it up differently.
Yeah.
Some do astronomy in 6th grade, some do in 8th grade. So
Yeah.
if you shift schools, yes, there might be gaps.
Yeah, similar to high school. Some high schools does geometry first year, or physics first year, or chemistry
Yeah.
second year. For science and math, there's no one way of
That's
cutting
right.
it.
Going back to science, when I was in school a million years ago, like we had biology, geology, chemistry, physics. I know you're doing more inquiry-based, but are you covering each of those
Yeah,
disciplines?
So the way the way they have it in NGSS, they have the life science core ideas, the physical science core ideas, and the earth science core ideas. In the middle school, in the past, they sort of, and some schools still do it, like they would say, okay, 6th grade just focus on life science, 7th grade just focus on earth science, 8th grade just focus on physical science. To me, I've seen different models, I don't like that. I feel like some students are very strong in life science, and If you only do physical science, you lose those students. So for me,
Or
the
a
way,
miserable year, you know,
or it's a
basically.
miserable year because they're just not so interested in it. Or Maya, she loves life science. She's not so great in physical science necessarily in terms of interest level. If I do a whole year of physical science, she'll hate my class.
Okay, so it's not physical, what was the other?
Earth.
Earth,
Earth
okay.
science. And Earth science covers astronomy and all the Earth systems, like.
So you do have a focus, but a mix.
That's right. So in 6th grade, we focus a lot on life science because it's something more relevant to them. But I do earth science. I did astronomy. I am going to do physical science. 7th grade, my focus is physical science, but I do life science and earth science. And 8th grade, it actually turns out equal weighting for all three. Yeah.
So life science is
More biology.
physical
Is physics and chemistry.
chemistry.
And earth science is everything else, I guess.
Yeah. That's what the new system, the
Yeah.
MJSS, yeah.
In public school, I assume they have
That's okay, isn't it? Go ahead.
in the public school, I assume they have a different teacher for like, just for example, like English and social studies. Here you have one person doing English, social studies, and sort of with unit of inquiry style teaching. And I'm just using an example. Are your English teachers then hired with, like, what expertise are they, like, it seems like there's a lot expected of them to be a master of getting the key social studies concepts across, doing it in a UOI style, and also
Well,
being a
if
great
you're
English
talking
teacher.
about our current two teachers, they happen to have the expertise. Miss Angel is, both Miss Angel and Randy, they're certified and have teaching experience of social studies in addition to English. Yeah.
We managed to get the talent that we
That's
needed.
why we feel very comfortable.
We also received a lot more professional development.
That's a good point. Because when
Hours
Wenlin,
they do it.
right, when Wenlin and I started, and some of our PYP homeroom teachers as well, none of them started as a teacher of everything, right? Chinese, math at lower level, and even science or units of inquiry. We've gained, thank you very much, a lot of on-the-job training and expertise. And some of these just make sense, right, educational, academic, or pedagogically. So we would go to training every year.